So, Ryan, the thing that I find most amusing about you and I are kind of resonating and wanting to talk about this movie, I think both separately and collectively, because this is clearly something that both of us like outside of the fact that we're about to talk about it now, is that this is one of those movies where I don't know how to put it any other way. It's just like, I feel like if you've seen it, you've seen it. And if you haven't, you're like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yep.
But it's like, and I have never understood why this movie has flown as, it's weird because like, I feel like I could say right now, like, oh, it's flown pretty far under the radar. But then at the same time, like, how does a movie with this many people fly under the radar, especially given the fact that it's a film that came out in 2007, co-produced and co-written by, I would say, like one of, if not the biggest comedy producer, director, writer of that decade, at least from 2000 to 2010 with Judd Apatow. But like this movie is just, again, like if you've seen it, you've seen it. But if you haven't, it's like, I don't know, like I don't feel like this is, I don't want to say that this is like a hidden gem because I don't think it is. I think that, like it's a really good movie. I don't understand how it's hidden. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, this is one of those things that it doesn't make any sense to me how anybody that was alive and seemingly had a heart at that time could have missed this, because I feel like this was everywhere. And then I realized as I got older that no, I was just jaded and thought everybody worshipped this like I did.
And that's the thing. It's like, it's such a fun movie. It's such a good movie that like, like it's not one of those things where you watch it and you're like, oh, well, I don't understand how this is a cult movie. It's like I watch it and it's like, if you were watching movies, like you said, in the mid 2000s and you were as constantly fucking done with these kinds of movies like you had to have been, there's no way you couldn't enjoy this movie. And on that note, on this episode of the Culture Cast, I am still your host, Chris Tashy, much to the chagrin of many, and I'm joined by my good friend. Him and I haven't been working together now for less than a year, but we've spent a lot of time doing it, including the fact that we're on a different platform recording now than we used to. My, like I said, my soon-to-be co-host, his soon-to-be co-host on a new show coming soon in the next couple months, Mr. Disconnected himself, Ryan Verrill.
Thank you again for having me back for something that I don't really get a chance to talk about all that much, but when you're hosting a month of musicals, I have to suggest Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story.
You don't want none of this dirty old Cox. Oh, my God. That's right. Yeah. On this episode of the Culture Cast, we are talking about, like Ryan just mentioned, Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story.
Now I have to help people with my music.
Like your family?
No.
The guy who brought you Talladega Nights, Knocked Up, and Superbad invites you to meet Dewey Cox.
Walk hard. Hard.
It's the devil's music! This holiday season,
There's a rift between the Beatles.
I've got a song about an octopus.
I like the little one.
Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story, rated R.
So, like I've kind of already alluded to, the film is directed by Jake Kasdan, written by Judd Apatow and Jake Kasdan, and it stars the one and only one of the true great, I think, double if not triple threats of all time, John C. Reilly as the titular real life character Dewey Cox. According to the post-credits scene, he is a real person. And to say it's a movie, I mean, it is a movie about Dewey Cox, but at the same time, it is also very much a send-up of biopics of the time. I don't think necessarily all biopics, but a certain kind of biopic of the time, specifically Ray and Walk the Line, which were still very popular biopics to the point where I believe both of those movies were nominated for a shitload of Oscars. Walk the Line did not win as many as Ray did. Joaquin Phoenix could have had an Oscar a lot earlier than Joker, of all things, for Johnny Cash. A movie that I remember watching in theaters and kind of enjoying. But it's a parody of those movies specifically, but also I think a tribute to anyone who loves music. And it's kind of like Forrest Gump, but, not as self-serious and more in the world of music, because there is a whole Dewey Cox interacting with real people aspect of the movie that, again, is is part of the biopics, but again, also feels like it's from other things. But all of that to say, Ryan, why are we talking about Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story?
So first off, yes, it is a send-up of all those biopics. Also, spoofing real-life things in a lot of these. So one of the biggest ones is like Stevie Wonder had a car crash and lost his sense of smell from it. And that's where the smell blindness comes from in Walk Hard. I loved this movie from the moment I saw it in theaters. And not only did I love it, but I was enamored with this. This is one that, like, I literally went to the store to buy the DVD on release date, stoked that it came with tons of special features, with the soundtrack, pulled to the side, with all kinds of like gag reels and linorama type of stuff that they could deliver just the most ridiculous lines for these. And this was around that time when iTunes was huge for so many people. I also, the day it was released, spent $10 to get this album on my iTunes so that I could sing to these songs all the damn time. I absolutely loved this entire project. Massive, perfect ensemble for this. Literally great music. Like, the fact that it's enjoyable outside of the film is a testament to how much they put into the music in this. It's just marvelous. And then on top of that, you have genuinely some of the best comedic performances that are played fairly straight in most of the movie, just in, absurd situations. And it's just fucking funny. Everything about this is perfect for somebody that was mid-20s at the time, single, sitting at home, working like crazy to barely get by. And just a movie that you could put on once a month and lose sight of everything while you laugh your ass off for 90 minutes.
So, yeah, you and I have only met in the last, year, but I feel like if you and I had met around the time this movie came out, I think we would have been friends a lot longer than this. Because to your point, I mean, this movie came out, you and I are only a couple years different in age, but this movie came out when I was 17. And I didn't see it in theaters, but I bought it on DVD the moment it came out because, again, like we've kind of already mentioned and alluded to, everyone involved in this project at the time was working on just as big, if not bigger things than this. But this is clearly, I don't know how to put it any other way, but it feels like such a passion project in a lot of ways. And it is a passion project. And Jake Kasdan has worked on a lot of stuff since. I mean, those Jumanji movies are a lot better than they have any right to be. But I think for me, I was and am and still are a person that does not like biopics other than this one. And the funny thing is, and I have said this before on other episodes, and I'll say it again here, the best kind of parody is a movie that is also a good version of the movie that it is parodying. And this is a good biopic for a fake person. That is the funniest thing about this movie. And if the post-credit scene of the movie is to be believed, he is a real person, which, again, just further reinforces the absolute fucking insanity of this movie and of the premise of this movie. And again, like you mentioned, my favorite thing about this entire movie is that it is played straight the entire time. And I don't think this movie would work nearly as well if it wasn't played straight. I actually don't think we'd be talking about this movie right now if it wasn't played straight. And that's the thing. It, I would say it could almost have gone the way of an epic movie or one of those kinds of movies if it was not played straight. But the fact that there are laughs, but we're the ones laughing. It's not there's nothing in the movie is reacted to by the characters in the way that the audience is going to react to it. And that, I think, is the ultimate success of this movie, just right on the face of it, is that everything about this movie is played sincerely. And there's kind of a wholesomeness to it in that respect. And I think a lot of it resonates from the performance of John C. Reilly, who I genuinely think is one of the greatest actors of all time. He can maneuver himself within the world of acting so seamlessly, from comedy to serious roles to mute. Again, his number in the Chicago adaptation, the film adaptation of the stage play, I love that song. And that's John C. Reilly in 2000 and fucking what, 2 or 2000?
2002, yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy to me because that's years before I would really see him in anything. So all that to say, I mean, again, this is a movie that if you've seen it, you get it. And if you haven't seen it, if you really like movies and you're into the movie watching experience, you're probably going to like it. I do understand if this movie doesn't resonate with you, though. I do get that. I just feel like, I don't know, like, I feel like there is kind of a little bit for everybody in this movie.
The John C. Reilly aspect that really blew my mind when I started to gain respect for him. You mentioned Chicago. If you haven't thought about it in a long time, not only 2002 Chicago for John C. Reilly, he also was in Gangs of Fucking New York in 2002. Same year.
A movie I have never seen.
Well, we're fixing that this year for you, my friend.
I know. I mean, that's the thing, like, you know, John C. Reilly, to talk about him as a film actor is one thing, but I mean, when I think of John C. Reilly, I think of Dr. Steve Brule from fucking Tim and Eric. Like, and again, like this, literally as far from this as humanly possible. I mean, one might say this is a very traditional role that John C. Reilly is playing in this movie. Like, again, everything is said with such earnestness that he says that, I mean, again, like, there's a line in this movie, it's quickly becoming my favorite line of the entire film, which is, "You don't want none of this dirty old Cox." And that line is played straight. And like, in a universe that we exist in, I am thankful that this movie has the self-awareness to be that fucking serious, because again, in a movie like Walk the Line or Ray, where all of this is played, again, like, but I would say played straight, but it's played straight here. Like, that's not, that, again, like, that's the thing about this movie that's really hard to reconcile is, like, it is a good biopic. It's just, everything that happens is absurd. And, I mean, the one thing that sticks out to me outside of kind of the sincereness of the movie is that right, Ryan Verrill of Disconnected? It's the use of the cameo characters' full names that makes me laugh every time. And I actually would even go as far as to say we never need a Beatles movie. That scene in this movie of the Beatles is enough.
Oh, man, I still can't believe we have a Jack Black playing Paul McCartney scene, and it's done so fucking funny, but so seriously, and it feels like they got the actual interactions right until it goes off the rails at the end, but it's just so perfect. And you know, with John C. Reilly, you mentioned Steve Brule, but there is a whole generation of people that can only think of Step Brothers, and he's great in that. I think this completely eclipses Step Brothers in every single category. Step Brothers is fine, it's great, genuinely a really wonderful comedy, but this is so much better than Step Brothers in every category for me. Beyond all of the comedy, I think just the fact that we have this ensemble together at this moment it blows it out of the water. You know, we could literally spend probably the next 20 minutes just naming everybody in this movie. The fact that list will include people like Frankie Muniz. I mean, that's out of nowhere. And then you get all the way up to bigger and bigger names. I mean, Jewel is freaking in this at the end. Like, this is not just some silly, dopey little low-budget comedy. This is earnestly played to really send a message like, those biopics suck, and they're all the same. And good God, do they do it in the best way possible? Because, yeah, I mean, you're getting a hell of great performances from everybody. Obviously, John C. Reilly, we've already mentioned, but really the two love interests you got to give a lot of homage to. I mean, we got Kristen Wiig playing the bowled over home runner here at home, who is raising all of the children and fighting with Dewey Cox at every step of the way. But then really the one that steals it for me, Jenna Fisher, who at the height of The Office, at the height of her like absolute level of attractiveness, she has never looked better than in this movie. Really stealing every scene that she's in and delivering some of the best lines in this. And a lot of people, you don't think of Jenna Fisher as like this powerhouse comedy actor, but she murders this role.
Yeah, no, she's really funny. I actually coincidentally also watched yesterday Blades of Glory.
Gosh.
Another movie that she's in. And again, like, I find it funny, like Blades of Glory kind of reminds me of this movie in a way. Like, again, like it has that same, it's that same 2000s, like late 2000s comedy. And like, again, that's a Will Ferrell and John Heder movie. Yep. But it has a lot of the same actors in it. Like there's plenty of I mean, again, like just Jenna Fisher alone is a pretty big crossover. And she's great in that movie, playing a different character. But Yeah, and it's funny, Jenna Fisher's just not in things anymore. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, I don't know how else to put it, but like she's just not in stuff now. Not the way that she used to be. And again, I mean, I think some of it does have to do with the fact that, like, yeah, she was on The Office and then she wasn't on The Office anymore. And like, to be fair, if you were on The Office and you don't want to work anymore, you picked a pretty good show to be on, because that's a show that, again, like most everybody from that show, including Jenna Fisher, she has a podcast now, right? Like,
Yep.
Still making money off of the show, still making money off the notoriety. But yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily consider her someone who I think about their movie performances outside of like a couple things, and this is one of them. Blades of Glory is another, and then Slither. But again, like she's a very small part of Slither.
Right.
But no, her and John C. Reilly are really good together. Like they're really, like they have some great chemistry with one another. And again, like, John C. Reilly plays, I mean, he has a lot of agency in this movie, but his character is also a massive fucking dope, right? Like, and that's the thing. It's like, the wrong kid died, because that's kind of the reality here of the story is, imagine watching a biopic, but the character that you're supposed to follow dies in the first 5 minutes is really what it feels like, right? Because then he's like, well, I'm going to try to do better for 2 kids. And it's like, okay. But the funny thing about the movie is, like, again, they paint the picture of the brother being the actual talented one, at least the immensely talented one. Because that's the thing. It's not that John C. Reilly's Dewey Cox isn't talented. It's just, that's the one thing about this movie I have never kind of understood. And it's hard to make it make sense in my head, only outside of just, again, the movie is operating on its own internal logic. But Dewey Cox has all these different kinds of music, and he ends up being like super successful for essentially country music, though, right? You know what I mean? Like, we see all these like different styles of music, but it never, in my mind, it never catches on. And so like it is a story about this guy who's trying to like revitalize his career and live within the changing time and place, but then it ends up just being he's a country western singer, essentially. Right?
Yeah, this is basically like a direct spoof of Walk the Line with some references to other stuff thrown in. So because of that, because of the Johnny Cash references, this is basically like 90% making fun of Johnny Cash and Walk the Line.
Right. And so if you look at it that way, which again, like I mentioned, it specifically is going after something like Walk the Line. I think that like that specifically makes this a little bit less timely of a movie in some ways. Like, you know what I mean? Like I enjoy this movie a lot, but like some of it is you do need to have a frame of reference for these kind of movies being made to completely enjoy this movie. Like I said, I think you can watch this movie and appreciate it as just a comedy, but some of this is like you have to be familiar with the things that the genre is already doing, because that is some of the things that are being directly parodied, like the whole thing with the wrong kid died, or the thing with like him becoming like a drug addict, like all of those things, or even specifically the scene where they're, like you have 16 seconds to do the next, to do the best song you've ever written. That's like, this is all directly parodying Walk the Line pretty much. And again, like those are the only parts of the movie that don't feel as timeless, but I think everything else in the movie feels rather timeless for the most.
I also feel like that portion is likely due to our generation. I think if we were Generation X or above, the whole, yes, it's got like country western leanings for the music, but it's more of like general Americana feeling to me. And when you look at, some of the stories of, Elvis is playing and he wants to go home early, so Elvis is actually opening for you tonight, like that sort of thing. It's got this just feeling of almost timelessness where it's affecting every single genre. And that's the fun thing about this, is you see him interacting with the acid rock of the 70s. You see him, coming up in the country western times, playing literal like hymns, basically biblical tunes. And then all that leading to Ghostface Killah sampling his music to put out a track that he's just blown away by. And it affects everything in so many different ways. And it shows that is somebody that was a foundational music artist, how it can have effect on every decade, every genre, every generation for years and years to come.
Well, and you're right. That is the thing that, I mean, again, I think that they nail is if it were just a parody of Walk the Line, they couldn't do any of that. But it was so smart for them to go, yeah, like wouldn't it be interesting to see how this guy could like try to like live within all of these different spheres that he has no like right being in, especially like when he's doing his like Bob Dylan-esque thing, which I mean, again, like such a specific thing.
Yep.
And then again, like there's like such, I would say, even more appropriately, I think this movie is for people that love music too. Like,
yes.
people that like music. I mean, again, because like, again, is it real? No. But again, a lot of the things that are happening in this movie did happen to real people. That's why they're being kind of treated the way that they are. Especially, I mean, you have the Elvis at Sun Records, scene of the movie. You have, I mean, and again, but then he meets Elvis Presley. Isn't that right, Mr. Elvis Presley? and again, like that's the thing. It's one thing to have it where he is that person interacting with no one, but the fact that they have him interacting with the real people makes it feel like, okay, this guy did exist actually, and it makes sense. Like he just kind of makes sense. Like it's kind of a bummer that Dewey Cox doesn't actually exist, but because again, like John C. Reilly's characterization of him is, I mean, even when he's terrible, he's not really terrible. Do you know what I mean? And like that's the thing that again, it's really smart because it theoretically should be hard in these biopics to love the people / characters in them because they're like troubled people, quote unquote.
Right.
And again, John C. Reilly just plays it so straight that he's just so charming. You never really feel like he's an asshole in this movie. Like even when he is kind of being an asshole.
Like marrying two people at once or going on a PCP drug-fueled rage, running through a city street and climbing a building and screaming. It's charming and stupid and absurd. And yet you think about it, that type of shit happened with some of these rock stars. That happened with so many of these artists that you're like, well, damn, yeah, they kind of just nailed it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, you mentioned Kristen Wiig. The joke with her character being this like very put upon housewife. Again, like, is it funny on its own? Yes. Just seeing all those babies that just keep showing up out of nowhere over and over and over again. I mean, she ends up having, there's like, 20 kids by the end of the movie?
Yeah.
I find it amusing that, again, like her character on the face of it funny, but then, again, if you've seen a movie like this, you know that, like, that character is like every single one of these movies where it's like, you're never going to have any success. Like, and it's like, I already am successful. I have a song that came out. Yeah. I don't know. I think the thing that ultimately for me, like with all the performances, like again, if any of these weren't played straight, I don't think that this movie would work for me. Because again, like, because we've talked about Scream, which then is parodied in Scary Movie. And that first Scary Movie is a good horror movie.
Yep.
Like, and again, like, I understand people going, well, that's not necessarily why I'm watching the movie. But again, that movie in a lot of ways is played just as straight as this is. And I think that is the best way to do this, because, I spent last year at the beginning of the year talking about Naked Gun, and it's a parody of Mike Hammer and other kind of cop dramas or cop TV shows, but it's always played straight. I mean, sometimes to not necessarily a lot of success with the later episodes of the show and then some of the stuff in the movie. But that for me is the success of a lot of these kinds of things, but there aren't that many because this is hard to do. That's the problem. I mean, the ones that are good are so good you want to share them with other people. Ask other people, have you seen, Walk Hard? And the people that I always ask that to, if they've seen it, they get it. But the other people, it's like, you've seen these kinds of movies before. If you have a frame of reference for where these are going already, I don't know if you'll enjoy this movie more, but some of the kind of deeper gags of the movie are not going to land if you haven't seen Walk the Line or Ray. But again, I don't think you need to, because this is so good at just being one of them anyways, that like it kind of doesn't, it makes you want to watch Ray or Walk the Line if you've seen it. But at the same time, like this kind of takes the best parts of those movies and remixes them in a way that it's actually funny. And I would rather watch a movie that has, the self-awareness to go, how ridiculous some of this shit is, as opposed to just trying to play it straight. Because like, as much as I remember enjoying Walk the Line, I've revisited it since it came out. Does that say it? Like I've watched, like you mentioned, I've watched this movie a lot in the last, 14 years or whatever, 17 years. This movie's 17 years old. Is that right?
Yeah.
17 years. That's crazy. But like, I've seen this movie, like you said, at least once a year since it came out. I have seen Walk the Line or Ray 0 times since they came out, outside of the one time I saw it.
Same. I've had no desire to see either one of those again. And I think, other than the whole playing it straight thing, one thing that I really got to throw out here is the work behind this movie, which clearly a lot of that has to come from Jake Kasdan, because we've seen he's a great filmmaker through other stuff. To be able to send up a whole genre like this, you have to be a good filmmaker. And there are choices made in this that show he can make great choices. He can shoot things very well. He can frame narratives in a way that are compelling, because you genuinely care about Dewey Cox in this movie. And he's a fake made up person that is a bad person. Like, by all accounts, he's not a good guy. But there are things like, we were just talking about the kids near the end, and they're doing the whole playing catch scene. And it could have just been funny to have this never ending line of new kids showing up and him playing catch with them. And even at one point, he asked somebody that's vaguely like of mixed ethnicity, and he says, are you sure you're one of mine? And yeah, like that in itself is funny. But at the same time, while he's doing that, he's using it as an aging narrative. And every time he switches to the kid and back to Dewey Cox, he ages slightly, so that by the end of the scene, he's much older than when he started the scene. And it's fucking effective, because it takes you right to the end of the film. And without that, it would have been absolutely trivial to put like a 12 years later type of scene. But this is so much better. It's an actual artistic choice that draws you into it even more. And then you go, whoa, what just happened? I just watched time pass in front of my eyes for this character. What is going on? How did he live those 12 years? I just spent the last 50 years with him. What just happened? And it is an incredibly good directing choice, especially near the end of this film.
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing. I always forget how front-loaded the movie is what it feels like. It gets to a point at the end where it just, I always forget it just kind of ends.
Yeah.
It just ends. And like, again, I feel like you obviously have the initial framing device, which the initial framing device makes me laugh so hard, where he's standing in that hallway. He's like, leave him alone. Dewey Cox has got to think about his entire life before he goes on stage. And it's like, okay. Like, again, that's the kind of comedy that I appreciate in this movie, which is like, it's so fucking dumb. Like, and it knows how dumb it is, because that's the point. Because they're saying, we know it's dumb, and we know that Walk the Line and Ray are doing these like really Oscar baity bullshit performances. And again, they're good performances, but like, there's a time and a place for it. And all I'm saying is, it's obvious to me why you would be at a movie like this for real. I wonder if John C. Reilly, if the Academy weren't so up their own fucking asses all the time, would John C. Reilly have been nominated for this role?
I mean, he obviously deserved it for everything that he did for this.
Right? Like, I mean, again, we've kind of mentioned it. What is the other thing about this movie that we haven't mentioned? Well, Ryan kind of alluded to it early on, and it doesn't say it on Wikipedia, but I think it is. It's a musical. On top of everything else, like, it's a musical. Does it feel like one? I don't know if it feels like one any more than Walk the Line does. Like, Walk the Line could be also considered a musical, but it's a performance musical. This one has, I guess, everything in this movie is a performance musical, right?
It is, because it's the story's not advanced through the songs themselves, so it's not like a traditional musical. But what's funny is, because it's a biopic, they use the actual storyline to advance the musical aspect. So it kind of comes around full circle. Like the argument between Kristen Wiig and John C. Reilly, where he's in front of the house and he goes, if you think that's illegal, then I'm guilty as charged. Wait, guilty as charged. And then he makes a full song. Like that is so fucking funny to advance the storyline and have him advance as a musician through the story, and takes that musical aspect and just flips it on its head. It is first off, a perfect setup of Walk the Line, because that's exactly how they frame that. But beyond that, it is great music, wonderfully tied into the actual storyline, and then carried out in a way that advances the story and shows like this is a well thought out, great directed film.
Yeah, well, I think it's very well directed, because again, they gave them the blueprint with a movie like Walk the Line and Ray. Like, they're playing it. Every shot is really overdone, especially towards the end of the movie. And the amount of melodrama is, again, I feel like right on the on the nose again, but it's like, smell this shit. I love the way this shit smells. It's like, again, like they're taking what you would assume to be is going to be like a really emotional scene, and then they completely flip.
Yeah, and they do that very many times. I mean, the first rehab situation where he's in the gurney and the doctor's screaming, "We need more blankets. We need fewer blankets. We need both more and fewer blankets."
Well, that's the thing. It's like when you watch this movie, every single time that they're parroting the thing that they're parroting, it's always like, again, like that's directly from Walk the Line, right?
Right.
More or less. Yeah. And it's like, again, I think it speaks to how big these kinds of movies were for like what felt like a couple years. But I don't know, like I was wondering, like, if you showed this to someone today that like as a younger person, like a Gen Zer, do you think they would like this movie? Do you think they would get this movie? Like, that's the thing. I feel like some of this movie is hard to get now in 2024, at least like the deeper references.
So what's funny, I was going to wait probably another 20-25 minutes to bring this up, but in preparing some stuff for this, I clearly just scoured the internet to see if there was any new references and anybody talking about Walk Hard or anything like that. As it turns out, people are saying that movie Marley, that is brand new in 2024. It's about Bob Marley. They literally said the opening for Marley, and I've not seen it yet, but I'm just going off of what people are reviewing it as. The opening is straight ripped out of Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story. So now the biopic that was sending up biopics is being ripped off by something that filmmakers clearly saw when they were in the middle of the 2000s. And yet they're doing it like unironically for a serious movie. And it's like, well, that's not going to work. Let's not do that.
Well, and that's the funny thing. Like, I always think, like, how have any biopics come out since this movie came out? You know what I mean? Because, like, in a lot of ways, and that I think is the other thing that, like, really stands out for me. And again, having already mentioned the idea that, like, this is a good biopic on top of it being a parody of biopics. I don't know how you could make another biopic after this movie that leans on the joke that this movie sends up the fucking 2 seconds into the movie.
Right.
He's got to think about his whole life. Like, yeah, like you said, Walk the Line is exactly that. And I'm not surprised to learn that about the Bob Marley movie, but at the same time, that doesn't even look like a movie that should be coming out in 2024. It looks like a movie that should be coming out like 2007, 2006. Like, and just seeing the trailer for it, I could tell you, like, oh my God, how much of this movie is in that movie? Because this movie just takes all of it and stuffs it in here. So it all kind of like loses any sort of like effectiveness as a genuine thing you're doing. Because they go in this movie, hey, not only are we going to present it genuinely, but we also are going to acknowledge the fact that it's fucking idiot.
The hard part is 2023, and I believe we talked about this on a previous episode. Maybe not. I do too many podcasts. 2023 was like the resurgence of, well, not even the resurgence. It was like the creation of this genre of brand biopics. And with Marley kind of is in himself a brand, because even after he died, like, he got more famous as, I mean, let's be completely honest here, being associated with pot. He is quite literally like, oh, he liked marijuana, let's put him on everything. And just his face and the colors of the Jamaican flag and his music turned into, let's advocate for drug use. And not that I'm against it or anything like that, but he is in itself a brand. So I think it's just partially a continuation of 2023. And we see that continuing. I mean, just recently they announced a biopic of Anthony Kiedis from Red Hot Chili Peppers is coming. Why? We don't need Walk Hard, the 90s version. Like, this is not something that is going to stay super popular for years to come. I mean, when you're making movies about the Cheeto story, we don't need every brand to have its own movie telling its story.
I was going to ask you about this because, like you just mentioned, biopics just aren't a thing anymore the way that they used to be, until apparently they are. Like, I saw, like I said, we haven't seen a movie like actual, like,
specifically musical biopics.
Yeah, we haven't seen one of those in a very long time. But
right.
Like, yeah, I saw, and that's the thing. Like, I'm trying to think here outside of the ones that have won people Oscars, Bohemian Rhapsody. That's kind of the big one, no? Like that's like the biggest one of like the last 10 years.
The Elton John one was pretty big.
Yeah, I didn't.
And then Renee Zellweger won one for Judy.
Right. Did she win for that?
I think she did. She was at least nominated. I believe she won though. But yeah, like the fact that they seem to be like a surefire path to an Oscar nom at least, right, let alone a win in many situations, is wild. Like Rami Malek does not deserve to win for playing Freddie Mercury.
Well, and that, okay, so to further that part of the discussion and also agree with you, obviously, and you are already alluded to it a little bit with the soundtrack, John C. Reilly sings every single song.
Okay, can we just talk about music for like the next 15 minutes? Because
go.
I have notes, I have memories. First off, genuinely, some of the best made for a movie songs ever. Like literally, I don't think there is a soundtrack that quality-wise, lyricism-wise, and performance-wise will stand toe-to-toe to this in quite some time. There's probably a couple that I could throw out there. Obviously, you're going to think of stuff, Prince did all kinds of great songs. I'm not saying that certain songs are not better than this, but as an entire made for this movie soundtrack, this thing is literally perfect. Every single song is a winner, and it's all funny as shit. The standout here for me, I have to shout out Let's Duet. This is John C. Reilly, and performed by Jenna Fischer, but it's not actually sung by Jenna Fischer. Angela Correa is the other singer here. This movie has some of the best wordplay, this song has some of the best wordplay in the entire movie, by far. Filled with innuendos, funny, sung earnestly, given space to have the jokes land, and the music behind it is catchy and well made. What other movie has done this? What other movie has, been able to have such a lasting soundtrack that was made for it, that is a parody that you will put on that soundtrack for years after the movie's comes out when you're not watching the movie?
Well, and that's the thing about this movie. Again, like you just mentioned, like they could have just phoned it in with the music, and they didn't. I know everybody who's seen this movie probably has their own feelings on the title track, "Walk Hard," and your mileage will vary with it. But like there are plenty of songs that are just as good. "Let's Duet," I think is a good one. I like the song at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
"Beautiful Ride," I believe is what it's called.
Yep.
Right? Like, it's really good. Like, again, like I sit here and I say to myself, okay, so it's parodying Walk the Line and it's parodying Ray. Two movies where the lead actors did in fact sing. Joaquin Phoenix does sing in that movie, right? He sings in Walk the Line. And Ray, obviously, like Jamie Foxx, won the Oscar for singing. And Jamie Foxx does a great impersonation of Ray Charles. I don't think anybody will argue that. But yeah, like it was such a thing. And I feel like I'm glad it's not a thing anymore, but like Eddie Redmayne and a lot of these kinds of actors, like really just like going for it with these Oscars. I mean, it's like, it's just weird to me that, again, like people were so into these movies and like going and rewatching them. It's like, how could you be into this when it's the same thing every time? And that I think is, again, one of the successes of this movie is that I'm not going to say it makes its intentions clear, but again, because it's being played so straight, it does just feel like a biopic, a really funny biopic. And that's the other thing, like, tell me a biopic that's funny. Like, even though this is a fake biopic, it's way funnier and more heartfelt than like the ones that are trying to be.
The only other one that I can really compare this to, which, funny enough, came out around the exact same time, but it's not a parody of other ones. It's just a parody of itself. This feels to me like a souped up, more memorable version of Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny. And it's about one person and not a duo, so that's a big part of it. But also, this is very grounded in realism still. Tenacious D actually performing with the devil is a little slightly less realistic than this.
I absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I feel like this movie and that movie, because that.
2006, I think.
Yeah, I feel like they're good sister pieces to each other.
Yep.
And I say that because, again, like, okay, yeah, this movie has Jack Black for a second, and that's fine. But that movie also has a shitload of the actors from this movie, if not, but also, including John C. Reilly in that movie as Bigfoot, which is a funny role. Like, that's the thing. Like, John C. Reilly can just be funny when he wants to.
Yep.
But again, like, I've seen interviews with him, and it's not that he's not a funny guy, but again, like this is the Rodney Dangerfield thing, except, like when Rodney Dangerfield was on the set of Caddyshack, and he's like, why isn't anybody laughing? Here, you're not supposed to be. Like, I'm sure that they, like we mentioned the blooper reels and stuff, went ape shit with the improv. And I've seen some of it, but like at the same time, like that's part of it. You know what I mean? Like it's just part and parcel with all these things, is that there is a cut of this movie that is a lot less earnest, I've got to assume. And that they really fine-tuned all the scenes that they're in with John C. Reilly, because he never feels disingenuous. He feels like a genuine character. And like I said, maybe he should have got nominated for an Oscar. I know that, the fucking Academy doesn't like genre films. But I would make the case that, again, this is the only biopic I will watch willingly. And that's because it has all of the jokes. It's again, like if you're parodying something, you have to be willing to say, okay, this is absurd in some respects. And that is the thing about a movie like this and the movies that they're parodying. I don't think this movie would have worked as well if they hadn't just made a biopic and put some jokes in it. If there were no jokes in this movie and it was just a played straight biopic, would it work?
I mean, the answer to me clearly is yes. And especially if you're just highlighting literally all of the music, that is the cornerstone of all of this. So again, I shouted out, let's duet, but I mean, we have John C. Reilly singing a song called Mama, You Got to Love Your Negro Man.
I forgot about that song entirely until I rewatched it this time. And I just was like, holy shit. But that's the thing about this movie is, again, like it has to do some of those things. And I think that, like there's a scene in the club where he takes over for an African-American gentleman, Craig Robinson, and he starts singing, and there's the whole, the talent scouts are out there tonight. It's like, why are they even here? But at the end of that scene, they confront the idea of, and again, like Elvis is in this movie, so it's a little on the nose, but the idea of white singers stealing from African-American singers. And like, I think it's a really funny joke, and it's not played. It's played super straight at that scene. But again, like if you know anything about music and the history of music, that was the thing that was happening. I love the way that they address it here, and they just kind of ignore it. They do it, and they're like, but if this actually happened, this is how it would happen. And that's the thing. It's like so much of this movie, because if you are a music lover, you're going to have seen some of this stuff before or heard about it. But because it's funny, it actually is worth. That's the thing. Like, I don't think I'd ever want to talk about biopics on my show. Not like a Walk the Line or Rick. Because, like, again, in a lot of ways, what is the appeal of those movies? Couldn't you just
Wikipedia them?
Well, and that's the thing I struggle with biopics. Because again, like this is a weird intersection of two things. Because it is a musical, but we don't and haven't done biopics on this podcast ever. Because it's one of the few genres I probably don't like at all. And that's not because the movies aren't good. It's actually because, the movies don't ever want to get out of their own fucking way. Because it's just like, let me tell you the most generic, basic version of this story. Where there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs. But by the end of it, more than likely, your protagonist is going to die. Which they make fun of in this movie pretty succinctly with again, a tacit agreement between everybody that how this is going to end, because that's how all these other movies have ended. But for me, as I'm sitting here thinking about it, as far as I'm concerned, like it is the only biopic I will watch. And it's crazy to me because I really don't like these kinds of movies. Like these are really an off-putting style of movie, primarily because of the fucking formulaic nature. And when you're able to say, okay, I get that they're formulaic, but let's have some fun with it. I think that for me, would I be disappointed if this movie isn't more popular than it is now? No, because that's the other thing about this movie that is hard to reconcile, is you have to have seen a bunch of other stuff to really fully appreciate this movie, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get every reference and joke, sure. But again, like you said in the beginning, I don't think that's necessary at all.
No, and I don't think so either, because like you've mentioned, like I've mentioned, and I would say anybody who wrote a review about this movie when it came out, and it's getting reappraised now, thankfully. Again, if you have all this time and effort spent on making the music good versus, again, what most people would be doing in this movie, which is not even doing music. If this biopic were done like any other way, like why would they do music, right? Why do we need to hear this guy singing? Oh, right, because it is a biopic about him. But at the same time, like there's a version of this movie that has no music because again, you can see those kinds of movies as well that are biopics that don't have the music and it's not being sung by the real person. I mean, that's the thing. John C. Reilly sings all these songs, but I know who's not singing the songs in the upcoming Amy Winehouse bio. And that's the thing. Like if you have someone as, I want to say memorable as Amy Winehouse, why even like, I just don't understand why try to climb that mountain. Why not just go like, okay, yeah, I think everybody knows this story by now. and you know, maybe something like an Oppenheimer is a terrible example or a great example, depending on who you are. I've heard that it's amazing. I haven't seen it yet, but it is in and of itself also a biopic. And I feel like the reason that I maybe don't like the Ray and the Walk the Lines of the biopic world, because I have no problem with like a biopic that is not about a musician. That's the thing. Like this is all musician stuff. It's almost musical biopics, not even biopics. I think I would go further, to speak of micro genre. I think this is a parody of music.
100%, yeah.
Specifically, right? Because I actually don't have an issue with non-musical biopics. I think there are plenty good ones where it's someone is playing a real person or again, they're doing an invocation of a real person. Because Natalie Portman that did the JFK movie? And like she's going full on like voice and look and everything. But I mean, again, like John C. Reilly is evoking certain people in this movie. He never is outright like, oh, this is supposed to be Bob Dylan. No, he's doing the Bob Dylan thing because he's chasing the fucking trend. I mean, he's jogging in 1976 on the beach in a tracksuit. Like, tell me that was a thing in the 70s, right? Yeah, that was a thing. Like this unironically was a thing. And that's the thing. I mean, that's the thing about this movie that really does work for me is if you don't play any of this straight, I don't think the fact that it actually is a biopic would be apparent. If it was just like constant fucking sight gags, like a scary movie, I really don't think we would be talking about this. And I don't think that anybody needs to make another movie like this movie, because if a Bob Marley movie is coming out this year that is doing the same thing as this, we're still close enough in proximity to time that it's shocking to me that you would go and try to do this for real anymore. You know, it's like the way Austin Powers kind of killed the James Bond franchise for like a decade. And they've admitted as much. They were like, well, we can't do the James Bond thing anymore because everybody understands that the part of the joke is that it's played straight in those movies. And this movie has that same thing where it's like, if we acknowledge the fact that these movies are all playing it straight and play it straight ourselves, we can do something that, again, I just don't feel like a lot of directors and screenwriters are interested in doing, which is saying, I understand that the genre is idiotic and you understand that the genre is idiotic and it's very formulaic. But at the same time, you can have fun with that if the people making it understand that as well.
Yeah, I don't think the biopic itself will ever die, but as you were saying, and I've alluded to a lot in this, is the music biopic should absolutely be dead. And the funny thing that we haven't mentioned in full yet, I don't think, is that the reason it should be dead is not only because this is a parody of it and it does it so well. So many of the stories are just the same story, and that's why this works. Is because they all have a really good phase where they're coming up and dedicated to the music. A lot of them stumble in with the wrong crowd. A lot of them did drugs and had like good music during that time, but bad behavior. A lot of them got straight. The variety show, I forgot about that. A lot of them, they get off drugs and they make a couple good things after that. And then a lot of them get awarded late in life for being a great contribution to music overall. But we don't need to hear that about every musician that did that. Like, I don't need the Axl Rose biopic because this told that story.
Well, and that is the thing. Again, like, because it's played straight and it is a biopic on its own, I genuinely am shocked that people are still doing it, because for the most part, if they haven't changed the way that they're telling the story in 17 years, which they haven't, they're not acknowledging the fact that this is a good movie. And I feel like it's kind of been relegated to the $5 DVD bin, unfortunately and unfairly, because I think musical biopics are fine, but the people that like them, I don't think they want to have their like feelings hurt or be laughed at. Because that's the thing. Like, you have to be able to laugh at that kind of setup if you're going to watch this movie. And I feel like if you're watching this movie and your expectation is not that it's going to be a biopic, but it's going to be a comedy, if you feel like you're being laughed at by the director of this movie, I just don't feel like you're going to watch it. Because again, the absurdity of these biopics is constantly being sent up in this movie. Like, again, he has a variety show. Like you mentioned, the thing with the drugs, going to prison, like all of these things in other movies are whole half-hour scenes. And in this movie, it's just a montage for the most part. And again, like it has a montage at the end of the movie that feels like such a specific fuck you to the genre, where we're seeing things that never happened. We start seeing him remembering things that it's like, oh, remember when you did this, when you did this. But then then as it continues to escalate, it's him just thinking about things that we apparently never saw happen. But again, in another version of this movie where he's looking back on his life, those are the kinds of things that would come up in those movies, like the baby being born, or it's that commitment to the joke that I feel like is, again, like that's what motivates me to watch movies like this, is if you're consistently hewing to what the joke is and refusing to go, well, let's have like a really funny bit here where it's not played straight. There's never any of that. And I wonder how much, because I've read the script for this movie, I wonder how much of John C. Reilly's performance is just him going, okay, who's that person of the time like? Let me just do them. And again, like he has such a great voice and such a great look, but like throughout the movie, he literally looks like a different person every 10 minutes. And again, is it parroting a specific person? Like you've mentioned, maybe, maybe not, but it is taking those scenes that you've seen in everything else and going, isn't this absurd? Isn't it absurd? And it works. But again, I just feel like for me, if you're a fan of musical biopics like this, I feel like this movie pretty much tells you to go fuck yourself. Like, doesn't it? Does it not?
It does, right? In multiple ways too.
Right. And that's the thing. I mean, there's a ghost in this movie played by Jonah Hill, who is the brother of Dewey Cox, and he just like harasses him constantly. And again, that's a thing from another kind of movie. That's a thing from another musical biopic, I'm sure. If there hasn't been one since then, I'm sure someone is going to do it. You know what I mean? Like again, to have this movie exist in a vacuum, this movie can't exist in a vacuum. You know what I mean? Like If you were to say like, oh, this movie's so funny, but do I need to have seen musical biopics first? I don't want to be that guy to say yes, but I just don't think you're going to enjoy this movie that much if you don't have a frame of reference for what they're parodying. Not because this movie's not funny, but I think the things that make this movie immensely rewatchable is that it understands the kind of movie that it is. And I don't think a lot of musical biopics are willing to say, like you've said, these are all kind of the same. Why don't we just acknowledge? And they acknowledge it here to the point where, like I said, I'm surprised that this didn't kill the musical biopics, because I don't know what else needs to be said about them outside of this movie. Like, if you're going to literally look at every single time and thing that has been done like this and say, these are really goofy, okay, why are we trying to take it seriously again? Why?
Exactly. Unfortunately, it still happens, and I don't really get it. One big thing that we have not said, because this cast is so long, there's still probably 40 people that we could name, but two that I really want to give an incredible shout out here is Raymond J. Barry, but the one that outshines him, in my opinion, Margot fucking Martindale stepping in, both of them playing Dewey Cox's parents, and Margot Martindale giving a wonderful performance as the mom here that's supportive, but also understands her husband's angst with the situation. And I mean, her death scene is funny as hell. The way that she supports Dewey Cox through everything is, wholesome and silly. And somebody who's an incredible actor like she is, did not have to make this movie. And it just gives those scenes that much more of this like vibrant realism that you can step into it and go, yeah, they didn't have to go this far, but they did. And I'm so grateful they did.
Well, and to your point with someone like, his parents, the Margot Martindale character and the Raymond J. Barry character, again, like you've seen these characters in other things. It's just, they're not, I'm not saying that they're not self-aware in this movie, but the movie is self-aware for them. And again, like when Raymond J. Barry cuts himself in half, he should be dead. But of course not. They're going to have that scene that you expect them to have in every single one of these movies where it's the two people reconciling, but he cut himself in half in the process. It's like, it's that idea, like you mentioned, of, oh, let's cast Margot Martindale in this movie because she's a great actress. And that scene, I guess, is it the first or second scene that she's in, I guess it must be the first one where he's like, where Dewey Cox is getting ready to leave. It's like, you've seen this in something else. And it might have even been Margot Martindale in that movie. But and that's the thing. It's like, but it's not, but it is. Because she's so good. Again, it helps sell this, sell the con. Again, like it feels, like everything about this movie feels so meta that it's hard to wrap my head around how this isn't more popular now in the time of meta. You know what I mean? Like, we're so constantly talking about meta stuff. Deadpool is so popular. I mean, this does for musicals what Cabin in the Woods did for horror movies, right? In a lot of ways, like it's an acknowledgement of like, okay, it is goofy, but can we make the goofiness make sense?
And that's the thing is I could see making like a fun top 5 list of parodies that are the epitome of a genre. And this would be there for me. This, Cabin in the Woods, Airplane are examples of things that I could say, like, these are perfect trope-filled send-ups of a genre that basically ruined something for those genres, and now be more creative, do something better. And that's one thing that we're not saying about this is when you're saying that musical biopics are all the same, you know, some of these stories still deserve to be told, but we're saying with the creation of Walk Hard, that is telling you, okay, we did it, it's done, do it in a different way. Be more creative, make better decisions. If you want to tell a story and make, Jamie Foxx get Oscar buzz for something, he clearly deserved it for Ray. I'm not saying that. I think he's kind of an outlier. I think he freaking killed that role. But other than that, like, if you want your Rami Maleks to be up for Oscars, do something new. Find a way into this that is going to tell a different story in a way that is not already, made fun of to death back in 2007.
Well, that's the other thing. You mentioned this idea of, okay, Rami Malek wins the Academy Award for Best Actor in Bohemian Rhapsody. He didn't sing a single fucking word of a single song in that movie.
Right.
And in my mind, like, how can he, I mean, I guess, great performance and whatnot. I mean, again, my mileage does vary with that movie. Him winning for Freddie Mercury feels like even the Academy wants to have their cake and eat it too. Because, like, I can't imagine nominating someone for a role that they're not singing in a movie that's all about singing, right? Like, it's like the Amy Winehouse movie. There's an Amy Winehouse movie coming out. Like, fucking why, first off? Secondly, when I was watching the trailer for it last night, I was like, this person is already at a massive disadvantage because all it's going to be is just them lip syncing to Amy Winehouse's music. Because there's that's the other thing. Like, why is a documentary not good enough? Why is VH1 behind the music something like that but more expansive? Why is that not good enough? Because again, I feel like if you're in this movie, you are trying to get an Oscar. If you're in the less serious version of the movie, right? Or the more serious version, because this is the less serious version of the movie. But if you're in a more serious version of this movie, you're expecting that you're going to get an Oscar now, right? Like, that's why actors were taking these roles in the mid 2000s, because Ray got nominated, because Walk the Line gets nominated. And then again, you have this going, yeah, that's great and all, but like you said, you guys just keep doing the same thing. And I remember that, was that Bob Dylan movie that has like 5 different actors playing him?
Yeah.
That is the kind of stuff that I am more interested in terms of biopics. Something that takes the genre and does something with it, or doesn't even acknowledge this kind of storytelling. Because again, it's such a specific thing for such a specific time that I almost feel like you need to do something different now because the expectation can't be this, right? Like, this has been done so well.
Right.
Fake and original. Like you said, I can't fault a movie like Ray, really, because Ray is a good movie and Jamie Foxx is good. But I almost feel like so many other things, the moment something is successful, everybody else wants a piece of it too. And Walk the Line and Ray end up spawning so many other musical biopics, right? Like, for like 4 or 5 years. It's like, who cares? Like you said, if you're not willing to just go, okay, they're all the same, why? I just don't understand why we're still doing it. It's like so frustrating.
Yeah.
I watched that Amy Winehouse trailer last night, and I only really could think to myself, like, what in God's name are we doing now?
Especially, there's already a movie out called Amy. We've already done it. Be done.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like this movie feels like we are done with this genre, so stop doing it. But they haven't, because again, you're tapping into the fan base of the artist, right? And that's really what this is all about. Like, just selling more Bob Marley CDs. Again, like, there's no Dewey Cox in reality, but there is a soundtrack for this movie that is Dewey Cox singing, for as best I can tell. And that's the point, right? Like they understand the workflow here, which is star in the movie. If you can sing, release an album of you singing as well.
Yep.
Right. And like that's for something like Rami Malek and Bohemian Rhapsody, he doesn't sing a single word in that movie. Neither is the woman who's going to play Amy Winehouse. But yet he won an Oscar for playing a real person without actually singing as that real person. So why are we doing these movies then? Like, if you're not willing to sing, you shouldn't be cast in the role, right? I have a hard time. This is something that I've been thinking about recently because of all the musicals we're talking about this month. But how do you feel? Again, John C. Reilly, talented artist, right? Talented singer. How do you feel about people being cast in movies that are not singers or at least musical stage performers being asked to sing? Does that bother you as much as it bothers me when these movies have these people that can't sing?
It bothers me in one way. If you were going to play the music and have somebody else perform it, and it's going to be like new performances of those songs, fuck that. Don't do that. If, however, you're just going to take original recordings of that artist and put it in the movie, even if like you pulled soundboard files from a live performance of whatever, and you're going to put that in and have them basically lip sync to an actual performance from 1992 or something, that doesn't bother me as much because you're giving love to the original artist. But also, there's plenty of artists that could do that. There's lots of people that you could find that could sound like Freddie Mercury. There's lots of people you could do that. You know, they did it for Ray. Jamie Foxx genuinely sounds like Ray. Right. He was incredible in that. But we don't need to fake it. That's the biggest thing is if you're going to have other people come on and perform the music and you're going to have somebody lip sync it anyway, we don't need to do it.
So here's another movie that I've been thinking about, and I'm going to ask you if you've seen it, and I've seen it, but I feel like, again, like they saw this movie and they tried to avoid the problems that this movie had. Have you seen the Elvis movie from 2022?
I have not. I have never been a big Baz Luhrmann fan. It's something that I want to see. I do own it, but there's something about it that has just been off-putting, and I know I need to be in the right open-minded space for it, so I haven't put it on yet. One of my close friends, who's the broadcast director of the Mets, adores it and has been trying to evangelize it to me since the day he saw it. And one of the things that he did as broadcast director of the Mets is took a shot from Baz Luhrmann's Elvis film, and I guess there's 8 or 9 different like frames in the frame of the entire movie going on at once, showing different scenes, all leading to one picture joining together from those frames. He did that at a Mets game. He broadcast to the world these different shots of players and the crowd and everybody in a tense moment. And that's the sort of thing that I love, that we can watch a movie like this and get inspiration for stuff like that, to be creative in other ways. And he literally treated it like an homage to this brand new Elvis film that he just saw. But the funny thing is about these biopics, everything that you're doing as a part of the movie feels like an homage because they all came before. It's like the opposite of a send-up. It's like you're trying to make a movie about Queen, and it just feels like a tribute to previous musical biopics. That doesn't work.
And to your point, like, because they all feel the same, the only thing that does end up setting them apart is the music. Like, the performances are good, but I mean, again, I don't know if I want to listen to Austin Butler sing Elvis, because that is the other thing here that I think is so smart about this movie. Because Dewey Cox is not a real person, apparently, though he might be, they don't have to contend with you going, I don't know. And that's, I mean, again, like, I don't know if this person really represents the real person. I mean, that's what a lot of people have said about someone like a Rami Malek or I remember when Joseph Fiennes played Michael Jackson that one time.
Yeah.
Like, it's that for me, it's that idea of like, sure, we have all these ideas about what we could be doing, but instead of actually doing it, we're just going to do the same thing. It's like, it is kind of shocking to me, right? That they're still connected to the idea of telling a story one specific way. Because I think for me, if you're going to do a biopic, like you've already said, it's got to be more. And is Baz Luhrmann more? I don't know. I don't like Baz Luhrmann any more than you probably do. And I would chalk it up to being like one of those Ken Russell-esque directors, but to mention Baz Luhrmann and Ken Russell's name in the same sentence is a real bummer for me.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the thing, like Baz Luhrmann's musical movies like Moulin Rouge and Elvis, they are different, but it's essentially just stylistically different. You know what I mean? Like it's just the songs are being played and they're nice to look at, especially with the Elvis movie. Like, yeah, Austin Butler sang, but when you have such a singular talent being parodied, I don't understand why we need to have someone playing them unless it's being played for a gag, which this movie does really well. The times that we get to see the real life people that are being portrayed by actors like, Paul Rudd as John Lennon, like Jack Black, like you mentioned, as Paul McCartney, but also Jack White as Elvis.
That was a big one, yeah.
Right. Like that for me, like I always forget that he's in this movie because it's such a fleeting glimpse of Elvis. But for the longest time, I was just like, well, why do we need an Elvis movie? This is pretty close.
Well, the other thing too, now it would be absurd to make a Jack White biopic. That completely ruins it. Him appearing in this shows he's in on the joke. He does not need a story told about him, about the ups and downs of the fucking White Stripes. Like, he has had a part in the industry in so many different ways that it would be absolutely ludicrous to ever make a movie about his life.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, again, when you're making movies for the most part about big name people, I just have, like we've mentioned, I have a hard time understanding why the narrative version of the story is needed unless you're expecting people who haven't heard the Elvis story.
Right.
But again, when you're telling a story about a person that never existed, that's why I want to watch Walk Hard more than just one time. Because again, it is the story you've seen, but they take so many off-roads into things that are just specifically for this movie. But again, at the same time, none of this movie is original, right? Like, it's not original. It knows that it's not original, but the comedy is what makes it feel so different compared to, again, Ray and Walk the Line, which are not funny movies at all. It could use some humor, frankly. That's the other thing. Like, I don't like watching those movies because they're so fucking self-serious. But if you watch those movies, they're absurd. Like we've already mentioned.
Yep.
Like and that's what makes Dewey Cox's movie, Walk Hard, such a fun movie, because it doesn't not want to be taken seriously. It just knows that if you're watching this movie, like you said, you're in on the joke. Everybody, you have to be in on the joke to appreciate this movie, I feel like. And you either have to be the person who likes biopics or the person who is worn out by bio. Because that was me when this movie came out.
That and the best thing that you can be, and we talked about this earlier, but just if you're one of those people where somebody says, are you into music and what do you listen to? And you say, oh, I'll literally listen to everything. This is 100% for you, because almost every genre except for like black metal is really present here. I mean, the fact that we have an evolution of the most popular styles of music from literally the 50s to literally the 2010s, basically, it shows exactly how timeless this can be. And for many of us, it was. Like, a lot of the stories that are depicted in this or are alluded to or referenced, we all grew up with those stories. So just like you just said, we didn't really need a story about Freddie Mercury. Like, I remember the day Freddie Mercury died. I was young and I remember it because I loved Queen so much. I remember, all of the times that I learned about Ray Charles. I didn't really need the story about that. And if you liked Johnny Cash, like, nothing about Walk the Line was surprising or new information or, oh wow, what a revelation to learn this from Joaquin Phoenix. It was not like that. This is all in the zeitgeist. Everybody knows most of these stories.
Well, and that is the thing that I do worry about with this movie as time continues on is, are people going to stop getting the references at some point, and will it just be a funny movie? And again, is it a funny movie on its own? Yes, but I like Airplane, which you've already mentioned. If you're playing it straight, again, like, if you're playing it straight, there are no laughs. Like, there's this, you could watch this movie and be like, it's not a funny movie. Yes, there are jokes in it, but it's not necessarily a really funny movie. And that's the other thing that makes this such a good movie, is because it doesn't even acknowledge the fact that it's funny. It can do more with it. Like that montage at the end of the movie where we're seeing things that have never happened. A serious movie would never do that. And this movie is doing it only because, again, I guess they must have done it in Ray or Walk the Line. I just don't remember that they have something like this where it's like a flashback, but they parody it perfectly because they go, well, let's just show you all these things that never actually happened, but did happen possibly. And that's, again, the thing. It's like when you can't tell if it's real or not, I think that's the ultimate success of this movie. If you put this movie on and didn't tell anybody if they didn't know John C. Reilly was, they might think this is a real thing. You know what I mean? Like it's that well done because John C. Reilly is a good actor. I don't know if anybody else would have been able to portray the role of Dewey Cox with such a weird, like he's aggressive at times, but then he's so, I don't know, like he's such a fun, heartfelt idiot character. Like that's the problem, right? Like he's an idiot character. He's that idiot character of these Judd Apatow movies. He's the man-child, but he's not the unlikable man-child as so many of those movies have. Like, I don't know if you've seen 40-Year-Old Virgin.
Not recently.
But, like, it hasn't aged well, shockingly. Like, and that's the thing, like, when you have this movie parroting a specific thing that I think will persist and has persisted, it's never going to lose that timelessness. But, man, some of these other, like, Judd Apatow movies have lost their timelessness because of the way that the comedy is being portrayed. Like, oh, I know you're gay. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, there's none of that in this movie because these kinds of movies don't do that anyways. Is this movie's rated?
Oh, yeah.
Unrated. And unrated. The unrated version, which is on DVD and Blu-ray. But I do have a hard time, like, with this movie being something that I could suggest to people. Because, again, like, if you're watching it and you don't realize what's going on, you are going to think this is a real thing. Because they've done so, and that's, for me, that's ultimately like the big question for making meta content is, can you make something meta for people that don't get that it's meta? And Deadpool, I think, proved that, right? This movie, on the other hand, didn't. That's the thing about it that you kind of have alluded to, and that I've also alluded to, is nobody in 2007 went and saw this movie. Like, this movie was a bomb in theaters, and it kind of pains me to call it a cult classic, but I guess it is. Is it? Like, is it? I don't know. Like, musicals I thought were very popular, but it's weird. Like, again, I feel like if you saw the poster for this movie, you would think it's a real biopic, right?
Potentially. I mean, even the poster's done to Send Up Walk the Line, though. That's the funny thing.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, again, like when we come full circle, isn't it time to just do the Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story part 2? But that's my point, right? Like you and I sit here and go, well, there have been these movies that have come out in the last 17 years that didn't acknowledge that this movie kind of ended all of that. So why not just make another sequel to this and see if we can stop them from happening again? I mean, again, I'm not saying Bob Marley doesn't need to have his story told, but to your point, we already all know the Bob Marley story.
Right.
I don't need you, the entertainment industry, to constantly go, well, you know this person, Anthony Kiedis, Bob Marley. Like, come on. Well, again, it's like, is it not frustrating that this movie has had no success when it came out and is now considered a cult classic, and those movies are going to make more money than this movie did, unironically? People are going to go see the Bob Marley movie unironically. I guarantee you that, which to me is kind of insanity.
Is this true?
Yeah, it's just crazy to me because, again, like, for all of the successes of this movie, I would have thought the thing it would have been stopping these kinds of movies from coming out. And it kind of bums me out that 17 years later, it didn't, like, it does bum me out because, like, I don't think James Bond and Daniel Craig would have ever worked as well as it did for a lot of people if Austin Powers.
Well, and that's the thing. It pushed the filmmakers to do better. Right. Like, Skyfall would not be a genuine modern masterpiece for James Bond without all of the Austin Powers movies.
Right, because they knew they had to do something different. And I just find it odd that as an industry, they can't get out of their own way still. They're like, oh, well, we're just going to do the music biopic thing again. It's like, haven't we already done this? Isn't there already a movie out there that says these movies are kind of all the same and you're doing it anyways? Like, that for me is, again, like, that's just the industry in a nutshell. But that's also the meta nature of this movie, is that it acknowledges how fucking insane these movies have to get to. Like the thing with, like, the flashbacks, like, that's a really funny gag, but they also do it for real in all of these movies, right? And it's like, again, they do it for real here too. But again, like, I have a hard time with these movies taking themselves so serious, like, given that the people that they're talking about had much more fun in their lives than they're making this out to be, right? I mean, that's the thing. Like, you mentioned the Motley Crue, or I guess you mentioned Axl Rose, like the Motley Crue biopic. Did you remember that on Netflix?
I never watched it, but there's that. And then there's also the Tommy and Pam show, or whatever it was called.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that I think that for me is, like, again, the idea of, like, why not just do that one thing, that one way, that one time, and we just need to keep doing it. Like, if the Bob Marley movie comes out and it's successful, I think there's a more than 0% chance we get more of these biopics coming out. Like, that's the thing. Like, you would expect them to not make money, but yet they still do. And this movie didn't. And it's like, okay, fine, I guess. But I just wish more people in the industry had seen this movie, because I feel like Jake Kasdan and Judd Apatow are just going, yeah, we know that these movies are ridiculous. Why don't you guys? Why are you being so earnest when we are being earnest in our ability to reject this kind of movie? Why can't you guys just be earnest in what you're doing? It's like, because it's all for the fucking Oscars.
So I do want to talk about one more thing related to this tangentially. We went this entire time and never brought up Spinal Tap. This is Spinal Tap is amazing, a masterpiece, a very different type of send-up of these situations, of a very different musical biopic that was very prevalent before this came out. It was relevant for the time, more so because of the bands like Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue, and a little older than that too, like primarily the Rolling Stones type of bands that did a lot of stupid shit, basically. And that is great. It deserves its place in the pantheon as brilliant and all deserving. However, there is one movie that came out after Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story, that is about a fake musician that sort of is like a musical biopic, but also not. It's filled with some other stuff, but has original songs. We've never talked about it, but we talked about the first movie. What did you think of Get Him to the Greek?
Oh, I thought you were going for Pop Star Never Stop Stopping.
That one is a very different type of send up, and it's.
But it is like this though, isn't it?
Yes, but I guess I'm getting more into the different creative ways that you could approach something like this. Pop Star is just a straight up silly. That's like a slapstick version of this, and it does work. But I think because of what it is, I don't think it worked for as many people for sure. But Get Him to the Greek is the one I'm getting at, because I know that we both love Forgetting Sarah Marshall. We've already talked about that movie. Get Him to the Greek is this weird sort of pseudo sequel that tells a completely different, related, not related story that has two characters, one of them playing a completely different person from the first movie. And it has all original songs done in a way that mocks the genres, tells a different story of somebody like that is out of the scene and going to a certain show to perform. And it's a little weird to talk about because, as we all know now, Russell Brand is an absolute piece of shit. However, it doesn't take away from the fact that I really enjoyed this movie. I think it had a lot of heart. I think that the music in this is really great. It doesn't come near as successful as Walk Hard does for me, but I'd love to hear what you think, especially because I know that you loved Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
I have never seen Get Him to the Greek.
Wow.
And that's the thing. Like, I guess I didn't realize it's a sequel to Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
It is the Russell Brand is playing the same character as he was in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Okay. And Jonah Hill is also in it, but not playing the same character as he was in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. So it's a weird thing. There's, again, a lot of cameos of famous people playing themselves. You got Lars Ulrich in it being an absolute monster like he is in real life and parodying himself, funny enough. Pink is in it, playing herself. The music in it is great. Rose Byrne is in it, and she plays just this hilarious, over-the-top, almost like what we see as Instagram influencers nowadays. That is a musician. And it's a pretty damn well-made film with some great, unique songs. Absolutely love it. Puff Daddy, hilarious in this. P. Diddy, whatever we want to call him today, hilarious in this movie.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I've never heard anybody go to bat for that movie. Like, you're the first person that I've ever heard like, oh, you should check this movie out. I was trying to think of like other things that are similar to Dewey Cox, and what is, like, again, a musical that is doing something different, but also sending up musicals. And I mean, something like Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog is a good example of, like, paying homage to the right things, but also doing your own thing that's not a parody. And that's the thing, like, so many of these just can't be parodies. Like, to be a parody is, because, like, even Get Him to the Greek's not a parody, right? It's just a comedy. Like,
yeah.
And like you said, I think that is the way to do these moving forward, is like, don't acknowledge the fact that we have to tell the entire story of this person's life or their entire career, just like one day or 1 week.
Right.
Or one weekend. Like, and I think that that's enough, because again, like, I don't understand how anyone can't just watch these movies and go, well, is this just the Uncle Ben thing all over again? Like, why do you keep seeing Uncle Ben die? Like at some
Yeah.
point, we know that Spider-Man is Spider-Man. And like to tell the whole story of Johnny Cash's life from birth to death, like, okay, I just don't see the point. And get him to the Greek, like I'm more interested to watch it now knowing that it's a sequel, but also that, again, it's kind of, it's acknowledging that there is a person in this universe that would be popular enough in that universe to have a biopic.
And that's the thing. Get Him to the Greek is not a parody of a film. It is definitely a parody of essentially like a character or person. You can see traits from like 15 people in history that you go, oh, they are definitely making fun of when this person did X.
Right.
And it is so on the nose in many of the scenes. I definitely recommend it. It went way overlooked at the time. I think people kind of hated Russell Brand, and rightfully so. But he's actually pretty good in this.
Well, and I mean, yeah, Russell Brand is hard to talk about. I mean, to be fair, P. Diddy is hard to talk about as well.
This is true.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the reason I haven't revisited Forgetting Sarah Marshall in a long time. Not because I don't want to, but because like Russell Brand in that movie, he is off-putting, but that's the point. I'm assuming in Get Him to the Greek, he's not as off.
Oh, he is in certain scenes. Not in the entire film, but in certain scenes. And obviously, it's basically a redemption story, like a lot of these movies. By the end, you're like, oh, he's just affable. Oh, okay, I want to be around him. Yay.
Right.
And then you remember, fuck, he's toxic. This is awful. Why is he doing this?
Well, I mean, and again, that's the other thing that none of these biopics ever really acknowledge, which is like, are these people really... Like, they're not good people, but they're human, right? Like, I feel like, again, there's a lot of these movies just make these people out to be, like, these tragic figures. And it's like, I don't think Johnny Cash was really a tragic figure.
Right.
I don't think Elvis was a tragic figure. Like, and again, like, that is that Uncle Ben-ness of it where you have to show them dying at the end. And it's like just do a day in the life or something, or do something interesting. Like that Bob Dylan movie, but don't just do the thing. Because doing the thing is just, it's not good enough anymore. I don't think it's been good enough since 2007, but well, and again, I kind of want to ask you outside of Walk Hard, like, are there any other musicals that you like? Because again, like since 2007, there's been a lot of stuff, but there was also a lot of stuff beforehand.
I love a lot of musicals. You've already mentioned Dr. Horrible's Sing-Along Blog. I think that's a great modern musical. Big fan of a lot of the animated musicals that have been out throughout the years. A lot of the classics. I mean, The Sound of Music is well made. It's not like one of my favorites. I don't revisit it all that often, but I think it's a decent movie. I am eager to check out at least some of the more modern versions that they're doing. Like, I appreciated the fact that In the Heights came out as a film. I haven't been able to watch it yet, but I'm eager to see that one. Yeah, stuff like Hairspray, I think, is well made. I've appreciated just a lot of musicals. I think that they get overshadowed and hated before they even get tried by many people, and I don't really get it.
I mean, I get if you're not into musicals, but yeah, for whatever reason, like, musicals like spark anger in people for some reason sometimes.
Yep.
And I don't understand why that is, only because, again, like you just mentioned a bunch of things that are really good. Like really good musicals. But yeah, like I feel like contemporarily now, people are like, I don't really like musicals.
Or even like right now, the biggest thing over the end of 2023 and into early 2024 is the studios hiding musicals in the trailers. So like Mean Girls it's a musical adaptation of a stage play, and they're hiding that in most of the trailers. I'm dying to see this. I love the original Mean Girls. I love Tina Fey, and freaking Walk Hard. Tim Meadows is a big part of this. I'm dying to see the Mean Girls adaptation. I can't wait to check it out. But there have been so many musicals over time. I mean, Singing in the Rain, like, nobody can argue that is a bad movie. That movie is a fucking masterpiece. The Wizard of Oz is one of the best movies of all time. It's not the fact that things are musicals that advance the story does not make them bad. I mean, who watched Sing Street or Once in the last 20 years and went, these are poor movies because they're musicals? Like, these movies have actual heart. I don't understand how you could be turned off by that.
Well, and I'm with you. I think, I don't know. I feel like some people just watch musical movies and go, I don't get it. I don't like when they start breaking into song. And it's like, okay, fine. But what were you expecting, I guess?
Right.
You know, like I'm a huge fan of musicals in general. I'm not as big of a fan of stage adaptations to film. So like a Cats 2019 or something like that. I'm not a fan of that. I'm more of a fan of just film the best version of it on stage. If you're going to do a movie version of Mamma Mia. Do you know what I mean? Like just to have someone, a camera crew, do what Apple did for Hamilton, right? Or Disney.
Yeah, which I loved. Yeah, I think they did a killer job of that. The iteration of Les Mis that got a release in the mid to late 90s, that was fucking incredible. I loved watching that.
What about the new one with Russell Crowe singing?
The actual stage version. Come on.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. I mean, again, to speak of musicals more broadly, because we ended up not talking about Les Mis this month, but why cast people in your movie that can't sing?
This is true.
Right? And I know people get rankled at, oh, Hugh Jackman's like, I get that Hugh Jackman is a stage actor, but like, it's an opera. You know, I just rewatched Repo, the Genetic Opera, and the problem with that movie is the problem that this movie doesn't have, Walk Hard, which is in Repo, you have a bunch of people who are talented singing with a bunch of other people who are clearly unable to even carry a tune for the most part.
Right.
And I was, when we were watching it last night, I was asking Dustin, I was like, should they have put real singers in this movie as opposed to stunt casting? And then they wouldn't have costed, it wouldn't have costed the directors $8 million. And I, Russell Brand, he's an artist. He's a singer, I guess. Like, I don't consider him to be someone whose music I would listen to. So maybe that is why something like Forgetting Sarah Marshall works so well for me, because again, he's not a specific thing as much as an amalgamation of things. And that's what works with a lot of these things, right? Like if you're not going to be specific, you're just going to draw from the real person's lives anyways. Like Russell Brand is trying to be as close to a Axl Rose type as possible without it just being Axl Rose.
Well, now I am desperate to hear what you think of Get Him to the Greek when you watch it in 3 days.
I mean, that is the thing. Like, I have to add it to this like long list of things that I never get a chance to watch anyways, because I have to watch all the other stuff. I was gonna the other thing I want to ask you though, like, because again, this is kind of in the same wheelhouse. Like, is this your favorite parody movie? And if it isn't, what is? Because that's the thing, like, this is musicals. We've never done parody movies on the Culture Cast, and we may never do parodies. But, like, I'll ask you this, because, like, I know some of the other folks I work with their answer, because we have talked about parodies together. But, like, I've got to assume this is, if this isn't your answer, it's at least up there.
Yeah, this is probably top 5 for me. It's definitely up there. I am a huge fan of the one that kind of launched that whole epic movie thing that we alluded to earlier. Not Another Teen Movie is a masterpiece. I think it's hilarious through and through. I've even used one of the Not Another Teen Movie gags this year while editing a visual essay for a physical media release, is how much I love that. If you look at it as a parody, which I absolutely do, I adore Mars Attacks. I think it's a masterpiece from Burton. I think the cast in that is fucking incredible, and most people do not think of that as a parody when they're thinking of films. Another big one that you and I have talked about previously, Tropic Thunder, is absolutely a parody and definitely up there for me. Spaceballs, another big one for me that I loved, and I love Spaceballs more than Star Wars. I just think it's funny as hell because I've always loved Mel Brooks' comedy.
Well, I mean, talk about someone doing parodies like Mel Brooks, right? Like Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, like Silent Movie, like all of those, right? Like that. I mean, again, for the longest time, he was that guy.
I mentioned Airplane earlier. I think that is a perfect parody film. This is Spinal Tap is great. This one is great. Ones that we don't really allude to as parodies, but the Edgar Wright films. I mean, when you're looking at Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, those are both absolutely parodies, and they're kind of both perfect movies.
Yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned Tropic Thunder, and obviously, like, I think Tropic Thunder is up there for me with my favorite movies. Like, every time I watch that movie, I notice something different, and it never ceases to make me laugh every time I watch it, and I've seen it a million times at this point. I genuinely agree. I mean, the thing with Hot Fuzz, right, and that's the thing that I have a hard time squaring away Tropic Thunder and Hot Fuzz, because they're both doing the same thing. I just feel like it's Edgar Wright. You know what I mean? If Edgar Wright had written Tropic Thunder, it wouldn't be as on the nose as it is, but because it is so on the nose, that's what makes it, I don't know, a great movie, but I feel like an important movie, because in a lot of ways, like, Tropic Thunder did the thing that Walk Hard tried to do and succeeded at it, which is forcing actors to confront the fact that they are doing things that most people would find a little less positive than they seem to, which is, doing blackface, or, like Eddie Redmayne doing, pretending to be Stephen Hawking, or doing all that, like, in Tropic Thunder, they have a conversation that I feel like ends people ever doing that again, which is, you never go full retard. That scene does what Walk Hard's trying to do in its entire movie, which is say, okay, do you understand how absurd this is? Like, do you understand how absurd it is that an actor is going and changing his skin color and pretending to be black? And again, it's a parody, but it's not a specific thing because it's like 1,200 specific actors have done this. You know what I mean? Like C. Thomas Howell, Soul Man, or White Chicks, any of those kinds of movies. Again, Tropic Thunder is taking a stand, and those kinds of movies haven't come out since. You notice that?
Right.
Like there haven't really been a lot of those movies where actors do that anymore because we're now living in a time and a place where you can just hire one of those actors. You can hire an actor who may already have Down syndrome. And like, is that stunt casting? That's the question. Like, I think stunt casting is what Sweeney Todd did, which is casting actors in a stage play adaptation that can't sing.
I don't know that I agree there. Who are you saying can't sing in that?
I mean, I love that movie, but Johnny Depp is not as good as the stage.
Not as good, sure, but he absolutely can sing. He's in a band.
I know, but let me put it this way. He's a musician. He's not a musical theater guy. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just the expectations are different, I feel like, for him as an artist. And that's why John C. Reilly is so good in this, because again, like I don't think John C. Reilly, I don't think he's less talented than John C. Reilly in acting Johnny Depp, but I know he's less talented as a musician because John C. Reilly is a fantastic musician. And this movie shows that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't have to, like, not that I'm saying you have to convince me that Johnny Depp is a good artist, because again, like I said, like you've said, and I've acknowledged he has his own band, but so do a lot of, so did Bruce Willis.
I mean, yeah.
And Eddie Murphy, you know what I mean? Like that, he might be the exception that proves the rule in a lot of ways.
That's true. I would agree with that. There's a lot of terrible Hollywood actors that have tried to make music, and it doesn't work. I to change the subject a little bit, I think I've come to the conclusion. I was leading up to my favorite parody. I think hands down it is Young Frankenstein. I adore that era of horror, and I adore what Mel Brooks did to make it silly, and the jokes in that are timeless. Like Mel Brooks, there's something about Mel Brooks that literally every single one of his movies are genuine parodies, but work over generations. I don't think there's a single one of his movies that are the more popular ones. Like obviously the 12 Chairs is not going to be something that, Gen Z is going to sit down to watch tomorrow or something like that. But you could watch Robin Hood Men in Tights and still get all the jokes, even if you've not seen Prince of Thieves, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. Blazing Saddles might not be. Oh, I adore Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Is that the Costner one, right?
Yeah.
I'm not.
I very much am.
Are you? Oh my God! This is like the I eat olives, you don't eat olives situation.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I get it. I've never seen it because again, like I just don't watch Costner's stuff.
It is a really great adaptation of Robin Hood. It's a lot of fun. It's so good. It's so good.
Saccharine Bryan Adams song too. That's that movie.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's all. I mean, it's got Christian Slater. It's got Morgan Freeman. It's got Alan Rickman. It's got. It's such a good movie. Like, there's so many quotable scenes and lines and really memorable imagery. And the big thing is, it's the early '90s, and they shot it in castles in the UK. Like, it's on scene, it's textured, it's something that you are feeling like you are living and breathing in the actual time. It's a magnificent piece of art.
Interesting. I might have to watch it then. Like I said, I've never seen some of Mel Brooks's later stuff, and that's one of the movies I've never watched. Robin Hood Men in Tights, right?
Yeah.
I've never watched it because I like that again. I felt like I had to have seen that.
You probably should to get Men in Tights, because a lot of the jokes are very much specific scene takeoffs from that Robin Hood movie.
So just like Walk Hard, like very, okay. And that's like you mentioned, Mel Brooks is such a good screenwriter and able to be like, I think like the master of parodying, like they are timeless. Like Spaceballs is timeless. Blazing Saddles is timeless, regardless of what all the idiots on Twitter say.
Yep. History of the World Part 2 still works for everybody. Silent Movie still works. Young Frankenstein is perfect. Like, all of those are perfect parodies that are absolutely timeless.
Yeah. And their timelessness, I mean, again, is similar to what Walk Hard is going for. I don't know if Walk Hard's super timeless. Like that's, in the way that like Spaceballs is, which is unfortunate. I don't know. I think because Spaceballs is not played for serious. You know what I mean? Like there's plenty of Spaceballs that is not played seriously. And I feel like I'm not going to say that like if you watch Walk Hard and you don't realize that it's all a joke, you might not like it, but it's going to be easier to digest a movie like Spaceballs because it is a comedy. Not, you know what I mean? Like it's a funny movie, mile-a-minute gags. Walk Hard is not necessarily mile-a-minute gags, but Spaceballs is, and Blazing Saddles is. You know what I mean? Like all of those movies have, I don't know, the thing that I always really associate with parodies, which is like a shitload of sight gags, like Naked Gun, right? And Walk Hard has some of that, but not in the way that like a Naked Gun or an Airplane does. It's for all of the kind of wild shit that Walk Hard does. It is a rather reserved movie parody wise compared to some of the other ones that we've already mentioned.
And that's why I see it as so different from Pop Star, Never Stop, Never Stopping, because it's not slapsticky in. I can't even name a single scene from Walk Hard that comes across as slapstick or only relying on sight gags, which a lot of those, like Scary Movie is like 80% slapstick and sight gags. Right, it's not like a smartly made, like brilliant send up of the genre. It's literally just, this is funny to look at.
Right. And again, like with something like Walk Hard, at least for me, that is why this movie didn't get as much play as it should have, because it kind of is just a biopic. Like at the end of the day, it kind of just is. And, I do wonder if we'll ever see another thing like Walk Hard, like if they'll ever do a sequel or like something else, because again, like it feels like I don't know, in the day and age of streaming, right? Because this movie came out 17 years ago. You could have a Judd Apatow making like a TV show on Netflix or so, like, and that's the thing. Like, I feel like now is almost the perfect time for Walk Hard to come back, because something like this still has value if they're still making movies like this, right? Like,
it's true,
right? Like, I don't know if they would have made Walk Hard if Walk the Line didn't exist, but it, I think, makes me enjoy Walk the Line more by having something like Walk Hard saying, don't you understand, like we do, that this is ridiculous? And if they're still doing it now, I think that Walk Hard should just, what would Walk Hard in 2024, 2025 look like? Well, let's go watch all the biopics that have come out since that ignored Walk Hard, and let's make fun of those.
Well, and to be frank, I think the perfect way to bring Walk Hard back would have been, which means I don't think they should do it now. I think they should have had a Dewey Cox movie come out in 2019 that was a like shot for shot send up of Bohemian Rhapsody, like this was for Walk the Line. I think if you look at the Academy awarding the Oscar to Rami Malek and go, what the fuck? All right, get me Cox on the phone.
Right.
And something has to happen. Like, we have to respond to this and go, Hollywood, what the shit are you doing? This is not deserving. This movie was not great. We need to make something happen here where Dewey Cox can come in and save the day.
Right. And to your point, like something like Bohemian Rhapsody, it is shocking that it won as much as it did, given how just kind of basic it is. To your point, it's like, what were they thinking? But again, the Academy loves a good biopic. That's why, again, you would be in this movie if you thought you could actually win an award for it, which is why Joaquin Phoenix did what he did and why Reese Witherspoon did what she did. And Jamie, it's like, okay, so they have a point, but I just feel like Dewey Cox just, to your point, yeah, like we need somebody to send these movies up again. Clearly it needs it. I don't think it doesn't necessarily have to be Walk Hard too, but I don't know.
Right.
I again, like parody movies are few and far between worth checking out after they come out, because, again, some of the movies, even the best ones like Airplane, like some of the jokes in Airplane do not land anymore, no pun intended, but it's because they're specific. And that's why I say, like, Walk Hard, I love the movie, as I know you do, and we clearly love what they're sending up, but, at the end of the day, it's sending up things that were very specific, and I don't know if you don't know what those references are, if you're going to really enjoy this movie as much as you and I do, or anybody who has seen those movies but is open to the idea that, like, you can also watch a movie just making fun of those movies wholesale.
See, and that's, to me, I think the funniest way you could do this is make another Walk Hard movie. Don't call it Walk Hard, but give it a different title that's similar to Bohemian Rhapsody or something like that, and then just colon the Dewey Cox story again, and never acknowledge that there was a first movie. You get a lot of the same people back playing completely different characters, and you completely ape another modern shitty music biopic.
Yeah. Yeah, I would watch that in a heartbeat. I mean, again, I would watch anything that John C. Reilly is in, to be fair. So, again.
I have a close friend who lives in LA, and John C. Reilly did a super intimate, I think 2 or 3 night stage play that he wrote and did himself that had music and stand up and a bunch of other stuff. And my buddy took pictures. He was sitting literally right up against the stage. I don't think in the last 2 or 3 years I've ever been more jealous of that moment, just to be able to see something that the world will literally never see from somebody that I respect like John C. Reilly.
Yeah, you mentioned Step Brothers, and I'm not a huge fan of that movie. When I think of John C. Reilly, this is the movie I think of. Do you know what I mean? Like, even more so than Steve Brule. It's like, okay, they cast John C. Reilly in this movie because he's such a lovable human being, and he seems like such a, like, again, you had to have someone genuine carrying the storyline of this guy being kind of a moron man-child throughout the whole movie.
Yep.
And John C. Reilly, like, if it wasn't John C. Reilly, it would have been Will Ferrell. Do you know what I mean?
Of course.
You could see a version of this movie that has
another good musician, by the way.
Right. I do think that, again, the quality of the movie does benefit from John C. Reilly not getting in the way of, oh, it's John C. Reilly. No, that's Dewey Cox. If it were Will Ferrell, I'd be like, oh, that's just kind of Will Ferrell again.
It's interesting, too. Another person that was in this movie that I think maybe a couple years later could have done a movie like this, I feel like Ed Helms could have made this movie, too.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I would agree. Again, a lot of those people working in the late 2000s, like, again, like they're in this movie, but they could also, again, they could have done it just as well. Yeah, man, I'm glad that we talked about Walk Hard, because I don't think, again, like, it's not that I don't think enough people have seen it, but like, I want more people to see it, because
Same.
It just kind of is one of those things that if you know, you know?
Yep, completely agree. And it's one that deserves more than a cult following. I wish more people would check it out. And if you get anything out of this, please also, after you watch Walk Hard, give a revisit to Get Him to the Greek.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that's the big takeaway. So Ryan, final thoughts on Walk Hard?
Final thoughts, go listen to the soundtrack. As far as I'm aware, I think it's on all streaming services still. It is, even if you're never going to watch the movie, enjoy the music, because that's what this movie is centered around, is good music first and foremost. Yeah, it's a masterpiece. I love this movie.
I'm with you. I mean, again, you mentioned it's unfortunate that it's a cult classic, and it is, because, I mean, again, you never want something you love to feel like it's not lesser, but like by calling it a cult classic, there's an expectation there, right? And then there's an understanding among the group of people that like the movie that we like something that wouldn't be popular in the mainstream possibly, but that's the thing. Like, I feel like this movie would. If this movie were on a streaming service right now, which I don't think it is.
Don't think so.
I just don't want people to watch this movie and like think, oh, well, if I'm not in on the joke, is the movie kind of talking down to me? And I never feel like it does, because it's John C. Reilly, because he's, right. And again, would this movie have worked as well if it wasn't him? Probably not. But at the same time, it didn't cause enough of a wave to stop anything else from happening. So I don't know. I love this movie. I'm with you. I wish more people had seen it, but at the same time, I'm kind of glad more people haven't, in a way. Because again, like, at the end of the day, if they're going to make another one of these, one of the things that would be required by that is for it to not necessarily be the biggest movie ever made.
Right.
It's not.
This is true.
Anchorman 2 came out so long after, and part of the reason that movie sucked is because they were just remaking Anchorman. But if you just remade Walk Hard, like you said, I think you could do a lot with it in 2024, 2025, and remains to be seen what by the end of 2026. What other biopics have come out? If there will be a Beatles biopic or something like that. And that is ultimately, for me, like, the success of this movie is, we know that the genre is silly. We know that the genre is over the top and saccharine and melodramatic, but that doesn't mean if you're not in the mood for it, you can't make people laugh while having those kind of over the top conversations. And for me,
exactly.
And for me, that's the success of Walk Hard. Like I've said before, and I'll say it again, it's a great biopic, and it's a great parody too. So on that note, we'll take a break, play some ads, and when we come back, we'll talk about the next movie on the Culture Cast.
From Weirding Way Media, Cambridge and Washawn is a podcast about two guys' obsessions, passions, and hobbies. Those two guys are
Mark Begley, host of Wake Up Heavy, Recollections of Horror.
And Ronald Zerigian, host of the Skelevator YouTube channel.
Each month we talk about the toys, comics, movies, books, TV shows, and other cultural phenomena that captured our imaginations and helped shape who we are today.
From Masters of the Universe to Saturday Night Live, Star Wars to Harry Houdini, The Muppets to The Elephant Man, Ronnie and Mark dive deep into the recesses of their minds to pull out treasured memories of things lost but never forgotten.
Join us on the first Tuesday of each month over at weirdingwaymedia.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Join me, Jamie Benning, on the Filmumentaries podcast, particularly if you enjoy stories like designer Nilo Rodis Jamiro convincing George Lucas to push him around to help gain the support of his crew on the ailing Howard the Duck.
Blam! The door opens, it's George. Everybody gasps. George makes a beeline to me. I'm literally back against the wall.
Or hear puppeteer Tim Rose's emotional story behind that iconic Admiral Akbar shot in Return of the Jedi.
I believe that war is something to be proud of, but not to celebrate.
Or how Star Wars editor Paul Hirsch tackled cutting so many successful films.
The thing that I learned from working with De Palma is that tension depends on a clock. You need to have the sense that time is running out.
Maybe Oscar-winning sound designer Mark Mangini's insightful chat about his work on Blade Runner 2049.
Not a single sound from the original Blade Runner in the new film. A great deal of inspiration.
That's the Filmumentaries podcast with me, Jamie Benning.
Hello, Twisted Humans. Do you find yourself wanting to know more about the latest murder, conspiracy, cult, or haunting? Then this is the podcast for you. In 1952, there was a record high of UFOs reported. 1,500 sightings. There has been evidence of human sacrifice, devil worship, and it is haunted by more spirits than can be counted. A family of 2 adults and 2 kids reportedly saw a giant flying thing with glowing red eyes. And meanwhile, the family's nanny that helped Veronica to care for her and Lucian's children was found bludgeoned to death in the basement of their family home. I'm Alicia. And I'm Sierra, and this is Twisted and Uncorked.
That's right. In the next episode of the Culture Cast, we're going to be talking about Repo, the Genetic Opera, a movie that, boy, talk about a movie where people don't know how to sing. You said you've seen it, right?
I've seen it, but not in quite some time. I really want to revisit it.
You should. I feel like you might get to the same place I did, which is, I mean, this is fun and all, but $8 million for this cast? Like, really? You paid Paul Sorvino to sing?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. And yeah, I'll be joined by my good friend, one of the hosts of Scary Stories We Tell, Dustin, to talk all about Repo, the Genetic Opera. So until then, Ryan, what's keeping you busy right now? What are you up to over at Disconnected and various other things?
Too damn much. As you're listening to this, I am about to be dropping an interview with Joe Lynch discussing his newest movie, Suitable Flesh, and the way that he came to many of the decisions in that film. Also dropping some fun interviews with big names in the home video industry, including Yellow Veil Pictures, which is a label that is doing some really beautiful things, but they don't get to get their name out there that much. They're so busy, they hardly ever have time to do interviews, and I finally got them. So come check that out over on the Disconnected YouTube or podcast. And beyond all that, I'm currently running an award show for all physical media that was released in 2023 called the Shelf Shock Rewind Awards. Voting is still open for that until the end of the month of January 2024. Live show revealing all of the winners will be February 18th at 7 p.m. Eastern, I believe. I'll have to check on that time. But hey, you can go to the Disconnected YouTube channel to watch that, or the Shelf Shock Rewind Awards YouTube channel. It is going to be a blast. Lots of people are going to be involved, and it's a big deal for a lot of people. So give us some time if you're into physical media and home video.
One of the co-hosts, frequent guest, I guess one of the frequent co-hosts, guest co-hosts of this show, Heather Drain, is nominated, no?
She absolutely is, and quite deservingly so.
Yeah, Heather's a good one. Yeah, I'm always happy to see someone I know getting nominated for something, because Mike White has been nominated for how many Rondos and never won? So whatever, guys. Yes, whatever. That's fine. You don't have to like the best movie podcast on the internet. Just everybody else does. I'm not talking about this show, though. As for this show, though, patreon.com/culturecast is where you can go to get in at $5, $10, $20, and $50 levels. But if you really want to hear something new that we're working on, Richard Haddam of Rankin on Bass and the aforementioned Mike White of the Projection Booth and I are doing a podcast all about James Bond movies called Rankin on Bond, where we're watching one James Bond movie a month for the next 2 years, almost more than 2 years, I think, until the new movie comes out. So yeah, you can find that on Patreon for $10. As for this show, culturecast.com, rate, review, and like it. Subscribe wherever you're getting it, more than iTunes or YouTube, more than likely. And go check out Ryan's channel too. I mean, a live show every Thursday night. If you're into physical media, what the fuck are you doing not going and watching it already? Don't listen to me. Listen to Ryan. He already said it. Yeah. And Ryan, thank you so much for joining me and for picking this movie. I'm glad I got to rewatch it in 2024 because I hadn't seen it.
It was a fun conversation, and I loved it so much I'd even call it a beautiful ride.
Wow. And on that note, we'll catch you on the next episode.